At SEC Media Days 2026 here in Tampa, Florida, SportsCall Auburn, Ryan Lavoie, Brooks Childress, sitting with Bryan Matthews now of On 3 and Rivals. Bryan, we certainly appreciate the time. Good to see you in person. How you doing today?
Yeah, it's great to be down here in Tampa. I'm doing great and looking forward to all the festivities that go on with SEC Media Days.
Absolutely, and of course we are in the midst of Auburn Day right now, and Coach Alex Golesh and company having their ambush tour stop in Tampa last night. And Bryan, just as we build closer to the season and we have a group of players that's now had more time with Coach Golesh and vice versa, I know it is typical, but we continue to hear positive things about the relationship building and about the team. What is standing out to you right now?
That's one of the biggest things he's talked about since he first arrived, since day one press conference, was building that team unity, that togetherness, having the players be able to trust each other. And I think he feels like the team has taken a lot of steps. He talked about it going from him creating opportunities like taking them bowling or different things away from campus, to them now doing things on their own together without any push from the coaching staff. So that's a positive step for them. And I think next he wants to see how that's going to translate to fall practice when they're put in situations where they're competing against each other and they're out there in the hot weather and it gets really tough and, they don't necessarily feel good or, things aren't necessarily going well. Are they still going to be able to stick together and have that unity?
Now, obviously, they bring Byron Brown here with the Tampa ties. Yeah. Alex Golesh has the Tampa ties. But I kind of get the inkling from just stories I've heard with them arriving at the airport a little bit, or certainly we've seen the social media. People in Tampa are not reminiscing on the Alex Golesh times, which, again, you'd think after building a program down away from one win up and this positive nature they've had it. But I think that those guys have a lot of positive memories. Has Coach Golesh or any of these players talked about their time in Tampa and what it meant to them?
Not yet, but I haven't been in a situation where we've been asked about it. But I think it's probably a good sign, several good signs. Number one, most of his coaching staff followed him, and I think all of them wanted to follow him. Most of his best players followed him here. And then the fact that people here are a little upset that he's left them tells them that they really wanted him to stay, right?
Sure.
So I think all those are positive signs. I think Alex Golesh has that personality like some of the other great coaches, and certainly not saying he's a great coach yet, but like a lot of them where people are drawn to him. He has the charisma to really connect and have an influence over especially young people. And, hopefully we'll see some of that this fall.
With what this team is trying to accomplish, it's so unique because we're now a few years into transfer portal. We're a few years into quicker rebuilds.
Right.
But we also know that Auburn has not had a winning record since 2020, and we try to get the proper gauge of an expectation level. And I talk about it with everybody, and it's difficult to judge. But what is reasonable for year number one? And, is there even in this day and age a very concurrent timeline? Is it kind of peaks and valleys when you're roster building at the rate in which you're doing it? I
don't think there is anymore. That doesn't mean it can't happen, but I think first of all, set your expectations at 7 wins and just put a little hope in there too, inject some of that in there because Auburn needs to end this streak of losing seasons. I think they've tied the worst in Auburn history, and certainly don't want to break that. So this would be a great year to maybe win some games that people aren't expecting you to and get to at least 7 wins. So that to me is the expectation. But I think in today's college football, it's not a 3-year plan or a 4-year plan or whatever. You can make the right moves and you can build up your program pretty darn fast. Indiana, was that year 2 or 3? Year two, yes. So I'm not saying Auburn should compete for a national championship next year, but they should certainly be on the path to getting, competing for championships. That's where Auburn wants to be, what's where it need to be, and that's the type of investment the alumni and fans are putting into this program, and they're not really getting that back right now.
And, you mentioned the quick turnaround with Indiana. Coach Golesh was asked about that over in the electronic media room, and he kind of chuckled and said, "You mean national championships? Yeah, that'd be nice to get it that quick." Yeah. But one of the things that he talked about going through that answer was talking about the health of this team, and how they were a little banged up in spring practice. Now we're getting set for fall camp here in a couple weeks. What have you heard about the health of this team?
Almost 100% healthy going into fall camp. I think Stanton Ramo is a kid that they needed to get back at left tackle. He should be ready to go. They might be a little careful with him early on, but he's one I think they're counting on. And if it doesn't work out for him at left tackle, they're going to have to, move some pieces around. So that's one to keep an eye on. But, health-wise, this team looks to be in good shape going in. Certainly there'll be some dudes getting banged up. I mean, it is fall camp. But I think that's a really positive sign as far as that goes. And I think there's going to be some really healthy competition just across the board, right? Who are going to be your top 3? Who are going to be your top 6 receivers? Who out of that group of tight ends is going to be 1 and 2. We probably know who number 1 is going to be. Running back, we know who number 1 is going to be, Cobb, but who's going to be 2 and 3, I have no idea. So offensive line's wide open. So there's just backup quarterback is a really important competition. You wouldn't normally say that, but that could be a $2 or $3 or $4 million competition, because if one of those backups doesn't step up enough and they don't feel confident he can be the starter next year, you got to go into the portal and find yourself a starting quarterback, and those are very, very expensive. So this is a really important fall camp in a lot of different areas.
And, one other position of note there, I mean, really, they're all positions of note, but with offensive line and given how poor it was at pass blocking last year, and how in general for several years it is underwhelmed. Yeah. They're going to have all types of guys. They're going to have some portal guys. They've got some guys that they have been working on. Recruiting-wise, they've done, I feel, a better job so far to this point for the future. But just in terms of this team, how many options are they still sorting through there?
Oh, I would say a good 10-plus options. I think some guys like Joe Simmons stepped up, is probably going to be a starter somewhere. Cole Best certainly will be a starter at center. And there's some other guys that have had, Derek Plaz has had a good spring coming back. He'll probably be a starter, but I still think there's a lot of competition. They brought in some veteran guys that were a little banged up, I felt like, in spring, and maybe a full, summer and to get healthy and the system a little bit better will help them compete better. So I still think there could be some surprises on offensive line. Rammel's one of the keys there is, can he stay healthy? Can he nail down that left tackle spot?
Talking to Bryan Matthews of On 3 and Rivals here today on the program from Radio Row. It's SEC Media Days 2026 in Tampa. So also, Bryan, again, when it comes to the depth piece, one thing that I've wondered about, again, last couple of years, obviously the intention of the offense was not to run the ball a whole lot. It was an RPO, but it was not to do the R part very much. I get the feeling that not only will Auburn try to establish the run under Coach Golesh, they are going to be very interested in a multiple back approach. So will it actually be just 2? Could you see a third guy getting a few carries per game in meaningful competition? What is the sense of how they might try to break down the playing time amongst their running back depth chart, and whoever wins those backup battles?
Yeah, I just think they've got 3 or 4 guys that can play. So I think they're going to find a way to play them. I don't think they're going to sit, Bryson Washington on the bench all season. Even if he is the third guy or fourth guy, whatever he ends up being. So, and, the kid from Troy, whose name escapes me, I think he's got maybe a role he can play on third down or special teams. So I think they're going to try to use those pieces any way they can. But, yeah, I think that was one of the emphasis of the offseason was getting more talented running backs into this program. And, Golesh has said repeatedly we want to run the whatever blank ball. We'll see what he says about that today. So that tells me that those guys are important to him, and a lot of those guys are going to play. Maybe as much rotation at running back than any position on the team, possibly. I would not be surprised at all.
Not trying to get ahead of the schedule at all, because, of course, the Baylor game is still a game that's of great meaning, and even though Auburn will be favored, they've got to take care of business. But I do want to look at Week 3 against Florida a little bit, because that game used to mean so much to so many. You've got a schedule now where you can play it every other year again. And the headlines write themselves with John Summerall being involved and obviously it being a night game at Jordan-Hare. So, I mean, again, what would be the positive and negative temperature of the program depending on the win or loss aspect of that?
And it's a big game for both teams. If you look at both team schedules, you win that game, that puts you in position to have a winning season, right? You lose that game, and then you're fighting from behind a little bit. It doesn't mean you can't win 6 or 7 games. It just means it makes it much, much tougher. So it's a big game. The 2 coaches, first-year coaches will be in the spotlight there. And you look at it, Florida's got some talented players. Maybe Their 1 through 22 is a little bit more talented, but then again, you feel like Auburn has an advantage at some skill positions like quarterback with a guy like Byron Brown, and we don't really know what Florida is going to have there. They have to find a new starter. So it should be a really interesting matchup. That's one where Jordan-Hare Stadium needs to step up, and it almost always does, and be that place that makes it really, really tough for opponents. Back in the day, I've seen plenty of Steve Spurrier teams, plenty of highly ranked number 1 Florida teams come into Jordan-Hare and get smashed. And that's the kind of attitude that this team needs to start having, and I think they will under Golesh.
Absolutely. And so, Brian, before we get you out of here, one non-football question,
yes,
because we just had the MLB draft. And, of course, we talk all about the players coming and going, and we know there's some high school players, as expected, drafted highly, Auburn losing. But what about the guys picked kind of in the late rounds, the Alex Petrovics, the obviously the Eric Guevara's, that
yes,
sort of thing? Do we think that all these guys across the board are officially going to be gone?
We do, unless there's some sort of hiccup or unexpected thing that happens. They're all going to sign us their plan. And the Major League Draft is a little bit different than other drafts, where most of the time, 90-something% of the time, they have an agreement in place verbally before they actually draft them. So, if a team has a pick at 245, they'll call 3 or 4 players and say, hey, we have this much money. Will you take it if we draft you now? And that player says yes or no.
Okay, I did not know
and
that.
they pick them. So that's the way it works out. So you usually don't see a lot of guys get drafted, but you do see exceptions always. But that's the plan. They went out and signed 9 players out of the portal. I think they're done with that now. I think it's 9. And I think what we're looking at now is one of the more talented rosters coming back. All those freshmen All-American in the last 2 years are going to be juniors and sophomores. And I think they've got another class coming in. Even though they lost their top 3 guys there, there's still some talent in that class, some guys that can compete. And they brought in some key arms for the bullpen, I feel like, and a couple pieces that can fill in the lineup too in the infield, and potentially center field in the Beverly kids. So should be exciting. Fall practice will get underway around end of September, early October, and they'll start putting that team together for next year.
I guess I kind of got lost in translation a little bit with the draft, because it felt like maybe it's changed more to what you're talking about now, but it felt like you could retain someone if they were drafted super late in the draft. There's always stories of guys improving their draft stock that came back.
After the 10th round, so 11 through 20, it's I think there's more possibilities there.
Sure, I got you.
Because they can't offer a whole lot of money. But in those first 10 rounds, it's usually a done deal most of the time.
I got you. He is Bryan Matthews of On 3 and Rivals. Brian, before we get you out of here, too, just tell me about what you and the team at On 3 and Rivals got going on as we go through SEC Media Days week.
Yes, continue to blow out our coverage of SEC Media Days, of course. Updates on the site, on the message board, you name it, social media. And then, we'll get ready to roll into fall camp. Continue to cover the basketball team as they have practices and prepare for their trip to Greece. And all that and more, auburnsports.com. You can follow me on Twitter /X at BMattAU.
He is Bryan Matthews joining us today from Radio Row. Brian, we certainly appreciate the time, and I look forward to catching up with you again down the line.
Sounds great. Appreciate you guys.
That is Bryan Matthews of On 3 and Auburn Rivals joining us today on Sports Call.